Most of what stresses you out is not yours to control. It's someone else's opinion, someone else's mistake, something from the past, or something that hasn't even happened yet. But here's the hard truth. The more time you spend worrying about the external, the more power you give it over your internal world. And in the end, it's not the chaos around you that breaks you. It's the chaos inside you that you never learn to calm. Stoicism begins where your illusion ends, and that illusion is control. Not the kind that helps you grow, but the kind that quietly drains your energy while you chase after outcomes you were never meant to hold. The world tells you to fix everything, manage everyone, and stay 5 steps ahead. But no one tells you what to do when life doesn't listen. No one teaches you how to find stillness when everything feels like it's slipping out of your hands. That's where Stoicism comes in, not as a distant philosophy, but as a way of thinking that brings you back to what's real, what's yours, and what actually matters. This isn't about becoming cold or detached. It's about becoming clear. Clear about where your influence ends and where your peace begins. So if you've felt stretched thin, if you've been carrying weight that was never yours to bear, or if you're just ready to stop outsourcing your peace to things you can't control, stay with me. Because this isn't just theory. It's a mindset shift that can change how you live, how you respond, and how free you actually feel. If this kind of reflection resonates with you, if it stirs something steady and grounded beneath the surface noise, consider subscribing. It's a simple way to support the space we're creating here, a way of saying, this matters to me. I'm ready to live with more clarity, more intention. Why does it feel like life becomes heavier the more we try to control it? Because the tighter we grip the things we can't hold, people, outcomes, the future, the more they slip through our fingers. And what's left behind isn't peace. It's frustration, exhaustion, that quiet, gnawing feeling that maybe we're not doing enough, not being enough, unless everything unfolds exactly the way we planned. But that feeling doesn't come from life. It comes from the pressure we put on ourselves to shape what was never ours to mold. The truth is, perfection is a moving target. Just when we think we've got things figured out, something changes. A plan falls through. Someone disappoints us. Life swerves without asking permission, and we're left clinging to a version of control that never really existed in the first place. It's sneaky, this kind of control. It wears the mask of responsibility, of discipline, even of love. But what it really is fear dressed up as strategy. We tell ourselves that worrying is a form of preparation, that anxiety keeps us alert, that planning for every possible outcome is the responsible thing to do. But as Carl Jung once said, what you resist persists. And often, what we're really doing is resisting uncertainty. We fear what we can't predict. We fear being misunderstood, unseen, unloved. And so we grip tighter, thinking maybe, just maybe, if we hold on hard enough, the world will bend to our will. But it doesn't, and it won't, because life isn't built to be controlled. It's built to be responded to. That's the shift Stoicism invites us into, not to become passive, but to become precise, to stop wasting energy trying to fix what's outside of us and start using that energy to master what's within. Socrates once said, know thyself. Not control everything around you, know yourself. And that's where the real power is. Not in making life go your way, but in knowing who you are when it doesn't. There's a kind of freedom that only shows up when you let go. Not in a careless, chaotic way, but in a deliberate, peaceful one. When you stop fighting every current and start learning how to swim with presence, that's not weakness, that's maturity, that's strength. Think about how many hours you've spent trying to predict how someone will react, how much energy you've poured into conversations that only happened in your head, how often you've carried stress that wasn't even yours, someone else's mood, someone else's mistake, someone else's expectations. All of it heavy, all of it draining, and none of it actually under your control. Aristotle believed that excellence is not a one-time act but a habit. In that spirit, perhaps peace is a habit too, a repeated decision to come back to center again and again, to pause before reacting, to ask, is this mine to carry, before taking on another emotional load. That kind of clarity doesn't come from forcing life to match your expectations. It comes from filtering life through your values. There's a quiet kind of wisdom in choosing not to engage every time your pride is poked. Not every insult deserves your attention. Not every delay requires your frustration. Letting go doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about your energy to protect it. It means you trust that you don't need to control every detail to live a meaningful life. Plato once wrote, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." That's the heart of it, isn't it? We spend so much time trying to manage people, impressions, outcomes, and all the while, the only battlefield that matters is the one inside. Your thoughts, your reactions, your choices. And yet, self-control is quieter than control of others. It doesn't come with applause. No one cheers when you choose silence instead of argument, or when you decide to walk away from chaos rather than fueling it. But those small decisions, made over and over, create a kind of strength that can't be shaken by the noise of the world. There's a rhythm to peace. It's not frantic. It doesn't rush. It listens before it speaks. It observes before it assumes. It creates space between what happens and how you respond. And in that space, something powerful lives: choice. The freedom to choose how you show up, even when everything around you feels unstable. When we stop trying to control everything, we begin to see clearly what's truly ours: our attitude, our effort, our perspective. These are the tools of the Stoic, not control over the world, but alignment with it. Not resistance to what is, but resilience within it. So maybe the question isn't how do I control more, but how do I carry less? How do I return to what's mine and let go of what isn't? The next time life pulls you in every direction, when someone disappoints you, when a plan fails, ask yourself, where is my control right now? If it's in your thoughts, your breath, how they carry their own pain, or the choices they make when you're not looking. But you can control your own thoughts, your choices, your response. That's your domain. That's where your influence begins and ends. And yet, most of us live backwards. We spend our days trying to manipulate the uncontrollable and overlook the very thing that shapes our experience from the inside out, our own mind. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And there's a kind of radical peace that comes with that realization, because it means that even when the world is loud, you don't have to be. Even when things fall apart, you don't have to fall with them. But that kind of control isn't loud or dramatic. It's quiet, subtle, internal, and it begins in the space between stimulus and response. Someone insults you, your pride flares up, your ego stiffens, and your first instinct is to bite back, to say something clever, cutting, to remind them you're not the one to mess with. But if you pause, even for a second, something powerful happens. You start to see clearly. Their tone, not yours. Their pain masquerading as disrespect, also not yours. The only thing that belongs to you in that moment is your reaction. And when you recognize that, you take your power back, not by dominating the moment, but by refusing to be dominated by it. Socrates believed that self-knowledge was the foundation of all wisdom. Know thyself, he said again and again. But knowing yourself isn't just about understanding your strengths or passions. It's about understanding what is truly under your control. It's about recognizing that you don't need to attend every argument you're invited to, that your value isn't determined by someone else's inability to see it, that the world might be on fire outside your window, but if your inner world stays grounded, you haven't lost. Still, this mindset doesn't come naturally. From a young age, we're taught to focus outward. Be likable, get approval, win, fix, predict, prevent. But what no one teaches us is how to filter that chaos through something steady, our own clarity. We grow up thinking that if we just try hard enough, we can change how people see us. We think if we say the right thing, we can heal someone else's wounds. If we anticipate enough outcomes, we can avoid pain altogether. But that's not clarity, that's control dressed as fear, and it's exhausting. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And most people are living exactly like that, ruled not by what's happening, but by how they interpret what's happening. That's why two people can go through the same event and walk away with completely different experiences. One is destroyed, the other is defined, not because the situation was different, but because their mindset was. So what would it look like to flip the script, to stop trying to manage the uncontrollable and instead master what's always been yours? It would look like presence, like choosing to breathe when everything in you wants to react, like observing your emotions instead of being swept away by them, like noticing your thoughts without letting them boss you around. It would look like restraint, not because you're suppressing, but because you're directing. It would look like intentional action instead of impulsive reaction. And maybe most of all, it would feel like freedom. Not the loud kind that comes with control over others, but the steady kind that comes with control over yourself. Aristotle taught that the ultimate human good is to live in accordance with reason. And when you really understand that, you start to realize that so many of our struggles aren't about what happens. They're about what we believe about what happens. They're about the stories we tell ourselves. They disrespected me, so I must fight back. That didn't go my way, so I must have failed. But those are just narratives. And when you learn to challenge them, to interrogate them, you start living with reason instead of reactivity. You start choosing your responses instead of being owned by your instincts. None of this means life becomes easy. People will still push your buttons. Plans will still collapse. Emotions will still rise. But you'll meet those moments differently. Not with control over the situation, but with clarity within it. And that clarity is a kind of armor. Not the kind that hardens you, but the kind that protects what matters most. Your peace, your integrity, your direction. Plato believed that the measure of a person wasn't in how they spoke, but in how they lived. And how you live comes down to how you choose, moment by moment, day by day. So choose well. Choose where to place your attention. Choose what's worthy of your energy. Choose what's yours to influence, and release what isn't. Because you don't have to control the noise around you to create stillness within. You only have to stop giving your power away to things that were never yours to hold. And the moment you do that, quietly, steadily, you step into something rare. You stop being at the mercy of life, and you start meeting life on your own terms. Ever finish a day mentally exhausted, even though on the surface nothing big happened? You didn't run a marathon, you didn't face a crisis, and yet you feel drained, like you've been holding your breath all day. That kind of tired isn't physical, it's mental, emotional, and more often than not, It comes from carrying things that don't actually belong to you. A quiet look from someone that you overanalyzed, a pause in a text conversation that you filled with imagined meanings, a situation that wasn't yours but somehow became your responsibility simply because you couldn't let it go. You walked through your day holding 100 invisible threads, each one tugging at your peace, without ever asking, "Is this mine to carry?" The truth is, we live in our heads far more than we live in the moment. We rehearse arguments that never happen. We craft responses to things no one said. We try to calculate the emotional weather of someone else's mood as if their silence is a puzzle we're required to solve. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." Sometimes the things we obsess over externally are just clever ways of avoiding what's unresolved within. We busy ourselves with the impossible, changing someone's opinion, rewriting the past, controlling the future, because those distractions, as painful as they are, feel easier than sitting still with uncertainty. But not all attention is helpful. Attention is energy, and energy is limited. You only get so much of it each day. And when you spend it on things you can't control, you starve what actually matters. That's where the Stoics were uncompromising. They believed your attention is sacred. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind." Let that sink in. Your focus isn't neutral. It shapes the kind of person you're becoming. The more you feed anxiety, resentment, or imaginary futures, the more those things take root in your inner world. Reclaiming your peace, then, isn't about doing more, it's about feeding less of what drains you. We often confuse reacting with responsibility. Someone says something rude, and we feel the urge to respond. A moment feels off, and we jump into fix-it mode. But not everything requires your reaction. You are not obligated to hold every emotion that passes through. Not everything that hurts you deserves a reply. Emotional maturity isn't about suppressing feelings. It's about choosing what to engage with and what to let pass. Because when you stop trying to control the tide, you finally learn how to swim. You begin to move with the current instead of fighting it. You begin to respond with intention instead of being pulled by every emotional wave. The exhaustion starts to lift, not because life got easier, but because you stopped trying to carry all of it at once. The weight of worry lightens when you realize that most of it was built on assumptions, on imagined futures, on trying to answer questions that aren't yours to answer, and once that mental noise starts to quiet down, clarity returns. You begin to see what is actually happening instead of what your fear or your ego wants to project. Socrates taught that the unexamined life is not worth living, but maybe an over-examined one, where every silence is suspicious, every change is threatening, every glance is dissected, isn't peaceful either. There's a balance to be found, a middle path between awareness and overthinking. You're allowed to let some things be unclear. You're allowed to not have the last word. You're allowed to say, "This is not mine," and walk away. And every time you do, you make space for something better. Space to rest, space to breathe, space to focus on what is yours, your thoughts, your effort, your boundaries, your peace. Energy, once reclaimed, changes everything. Conversations become lighter because you're not secretly trying to prove something. Decisions become easier because they're not tangled up in someone else's expectations. Even stillness becomes productive because you're no longer measuring your worth by how much you're fixing. That's the shift, when your value stops being tied to what you control and starts being grounded in how you respond to what you can't. Aristotle said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom, and part of knowing yourself is knowing where your lines are, knowing when you're leaking energy, not because of what's happening, but because of where you've placed your attention." If your peace is constantly at the mercy of someone else's tone, then your power is in the wrong place. But if you can return to your center, even when things around you are loud, uncertain, or unfair, then you found something rare. You found the kind of peace that doesn't ask the world to behave, the kind that isn't reactive, the kind that doesn't need permission to exist. So the next time you feel drained by the end of a quiet day, pause. Don't rush to fill the silence. Ask yourself gently, what did I carry today that wasn't mine? What conversation, fear, or fantasy did I hand my energy to? And what can I release? Not tomorrow, not later, but right now. Because the peace you're searching for isn't hiding in a perfect outcome. It's right here, underneath all the things you've been trying to hold. And the moment you stop gripping what you can't shape, you realize you were never powerless. You were just distracted. Most people hear the word acceptance and immediately assume it means surrendering, giving up, waving the white flag to life and letting it roll over you. But that's not what acceptance is, not even close. Acceptance isn't weakness, it's clarity. It's the ability to see things as they actually are, not as you wish they were, or as they used to be, or as someone told you they should be. It's the moment you stop editing the story to make yourself more comfortable and start reading it for what it truly says. Acceptance is when you finally look something square in the eye and say, this happened. This is gone. This is real. There's no spin, no bargaining, no fantasy. That doesn't mean you like it. It doesn't mean you wanted it. And it certainly doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. What it means is that you've decided to stop fighting what already is, because that's where most of our pain hides, in the struggle between what's true and what we think should be true. We convince ourselves that if we resist hard enough, maybe reality will budge. Maybe people will become who we need them to be. Maybe the past will undo itself, but it doesn't. And while we wait, we waste time. We bleed energy. We think acceptance will trap us, when in fact it's the only way out. Because you can't change what you won't face. You can't fix what you refuse to admit is broken. You can't grow past a version of yourself you're still busy justifying. So when you finally accept something, fully, without conditions, that's when everything begins to shift. You move from being stuck to being free, from resisting to responding, from hiding to healing. And it's not instant, it's not easy, but it is real. And real change only happens in the present, not in the imaginary world where things turned out differently, but in the world that actually is. Aristotle said, "It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it." The same can be said of emotions and experiences. Acceptance doesn't mean you approve of what happened. It doesn't mean you pretend it was okay. It means you allow it to be what it is, without denial, without dramatizing, without dressing it up. That space between the facts and the stories we add to those facts, that's where suffering often hides, and acceptance clears that space. It strips things down, not to make life colder, but to make it clearer. Because clarity is strength. There's a kind of relief in finally saying, this is who they are. Not who you hoped they'd become, not who they promised they were, but who they actually showed up as, consistently, clearly. And once you accept that, you stop arguing with their reality. You stop rewriting your past to justify your attachment. You stop trying to force love out of someone who never knew how to offer it. And that's powerful. Not because it erases the pain, but because it returns you to yourself. It puts you back in motion. Plato taught that truth is the beginning of every good, and truth begins with acceptance. The truth of a lost relationship, the truth of a closed door, the truth of your own flaws, your own limits, your own capacity to grow. We spend so much energy trying to keep certain truths out of view, hoping that if we don't name them, they won't hurt us. But it's not the truth that hurts. It's the fear of looking at it. Once you do, you realize it's not a wall, it's a mirror. And when you face that mirror, honestly, something shifts. You're no longer just reacting to the world. You're responding to it from a place of grounded understanding. Acceptance also demands a different kind of bravery. Not the loud kind that charges into battle, but the quiet kind that sits with discomfort without needing to escape it. Socrates believed that self-examination was the foundation of a meaningful life, and accepting what we find in that examination, even the parts we don't like, is where that meaning begins. That's when you start asking real questions. What now? Who do I want to become now that I've stopped pretending everything's fine? How do I build from here? Because that's the beauty of acceptance. It doesn't leave you empty. It makes space to rebuild, to create new meaning, to decide what matters going forward. When you're no longer tangled in fantasies or weighed down by denial, you can finally see the road ahead. Maybe it's uncertain, maybe it's difficult, but at least it's real. And real life is where all growth begins. There's nothing passive about facing what hurts you. There's nothing weak about acknowledging that something is over. In fact, that's where the strongest version of you is born. The one that doesn't need to control everything, doesn't hide from reality, doesn't collapse under the weight of disappointment. The one who stands up, looks around and says, "This is where I am, and I'm ready to begin again." So no, acceptance isn't giving up, it's waking up. It's the decision to stop wasting your strength on fighting what is, and to start using that strength to shape what can be. And when you make that shift, when you stop resisting and start responding with clarity and intention, you become something unshakable. Not because life got easier, but because you finally decided to meet it where it really lives, in the present, in the truth, in acceptance. Every moment, whether we notice it or not, offers us a choice, a subtle, invisible fork in the road. We can react or we can respond, and while both roads are always available, they lead to very different places. Reaction is fast. It's charged with emotion. It comes from the gut, from memory, from pride. It often feels satisfying in the heat of the moment. A comeback, a slammed door, a sharp message sent too quickly. But that satisfaction is short-lived. What follows is usually regret, confusion, or the kind of silence that lingers a little too long. On the other hand, response is slower. It's not passive, it's intentional. It carries restraint, not because you're holding back, but because you're choosing forward. It's what happens when you create space between what you feel and what you do. That space is where everything changes. When someone speaks to you with disrespect, it's easy to absorb their tone and fire it back. But if you observe instead, if you ask yourself, is this about me or about something they haven't resolved, you begin to see the situation more clearly. You stop making it personal. You stop turning someone else's mood into your burden. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. And the more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. You build a kind of inner pause button, and every time you press it, you reclaim your authority. Carl Jung said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." Most people never find that space. They live in reaction, habitual, automatic, unconscious. It's not because they're bad, it's because they've never been taught that there's another way. But once you become aware of that gap between what happens and how you act, everything slows down just enough to allow for choice. And with that choice, you become someone different. Someone deliberate, someone who doesn't get pulled into every drama or every mood swing around them. This doesn't mean you never feel angry, sad, frustrated, or confused. It means you don't let those feelings run your life. Socrates once said, "No man has the right to be an amateur in the matter of physical training, but it is a shame for a man to grow old without seeing the beauty and strength of which his body is capable." Replace body with mind, and the same truth applies. If we never train our emotional responses, we never see the strength and clarity we're truly capable of. The discipline of response is a kind of inner fitness, one that keeps you steady when life feels chaotic. When plans fall apart, the mind naturally wants to spiral. It starts building worst-case scenarios, attaching meaning where there's none, blaming others or blaming yourself. But spiraling doesn't solve anything. What it does is create more chaos internally than what you are already dealing with externally. Response doesn't ignore the disappointment, it just redirects your energy. Instead of spiraling, you adapt. You take a breath, you look at what's still within reach, and you decide, what's the next right step from here? This isn't about controlling the world. That's the illusion most people fall for, that if they just try hard enough, they can manage everything outside of them. But real power doesn't come from managing people, events, or timing. It comes from managing yourself, from becoming the kind of person who doesn't need everything to go right in order to stay aligned. Plato taught that the measure of a man is what he does with power. And the highest form of power isn't over others. It's over how you show up even when things fall apart. That's the shift. You stop trying to make everything around you cooperate, and you start leading yourself. You lead your thoughts. You lead your emotions. You lead your reactions. It doesn't mean you're perfect. It means you're present. And that presence becomes your power. The world may still throw the same storms at you, but you won't be the same person who used to panic when they hit. You'll have trained for it, not through avoidance, but through awareness. Aristotle believed that excellence was not a one-time act, but a habit. In the same way, emotional strength is built in the small, repeated moments where you choose response over reaction. When you walk away instead of escalating. When you breathe instead of biting back. When you give yourself time to think before you speak. Those moments don't just protect your peace, they define your character. They show you that calm isn't just something you stumble into. It's something you build. And once you've built it, something incredible happens. Even chaos becomes a classroom. You stop seeing conflict as something to fear. You stop seeing change as something to dread. You start learning from discomfort instead of running from it. That's the real reward. Not just that you feel more in control, but that you become someone who doesn't need control to feel grounded. So the next time you feel the urge to react, pause, notice it, sit with it, and remind yourself that in this moment, right now, you have a choice. Not over what happened, but over what happens next. That choice is yours. And the more often you choose with clarity, the less life can shake you. Because peace isn't about perfect conditions. It's about mastering your response when conditions are far from perfect. That's the strength Stoicism points us toward. Not control over life, but control over how you live it. You don't need to control every moment to find peace. You just need to control how you meet it. Thanks for being here and for being a part of Stoic Journal. If this message spoke to something real in you, there's another video on screen right now that will take you even deeper into this path of clarity and strength. Give it a watch. And when life feels heavy again, remember, this space is always here to help you reset. You're welcome back whenever you need it.